Alright, so welcome to another painting tutorial. Here are some of my boys from the Burna Boy set, which is a Kill Team Ork set. And I didn't make all of them Burna Boys because I just like varied weapons. And I'm not adhering to Wiswig, which is needing to have every model be representative of the exact payload of what they're actually carrying. So this is the effect that we're going for, and this is a quick method of painting the orcs. I also bought a box of Gretchen that you see here, and I use the exact same method for painting these guys as well. So the first step is with these Ork Boyz, this box set that I bought, spray prime them after assembly, and the primer that I use is basically this Rust-Oleum Camouflage 2x Ultra Cover, and this is, what's the name of this? Appropriately, Army Green. So this is the color that I use. And incidentally, this is actually the same color that I use to prime and paint my Death Guard. So I use the very same spray primer, but instead of using the green wash that I use for the orcs, I use this Seraphim Sepia Army Painter. You can use the Strong Tone and it'll be very similar as well. But for today I'll be using the green Army Painter. I know Citadel or Games Workshop comes out with their own version of green, so it really doesn't matter which one you get. But by using the wash, it goes from basically this light olive color that you see here, and it will turn darker. So that's basically what we are aiming for. So the first step in all of this is basically, after assembly, is to base them, just to paint it brown. And I have intention basing them with gravel as well as flock later, and I'll probably show you towards the end of the video how to do that. But I use cheap craft paint for that process, and this is just chocolate bar, but you can use any burnt umber or anything like that. Americana is another good craft paint. Well, I still use craft paint a lot for a lot of projects, and so I like to paint these before I glue them on. And I just put a drop on each one, and I use a big brush and water it down over here. And just spread it around. I don't go all the way to the edge, but pretty much just paint across here. Like so. And that's good enough. I'll go ahead and show you how to put the green wash on this guy. So I'll put this down onto my palette. And I do use a bigger brush and liberally just wash over all the skin. And it doesn't matter if you get it onto other parts that isn't skin, because you're going to be able to paint over it pretty easily. You just want to put a liberal wash all over, and this provides just natural shading for the figure. So now we just gotta wait for him to dry. Alright, so the skin has dried, the wash, and as you can tell, it automatically provides shading. And at this point, some painters will go ahead and highlight with a lighter olive green, but again, this is just to get these on the table as fast as possible. So I go on to my next color, which is Palomino Gold, because if you try to put regular yellow on right away, it doesn't cover very well. Yellows typically, and even some reds and oranges, they have a hard time covering anything that's not white. And so I like to do anything that's going to be yellow with this color first, which is sort of a deeper mustard color, before I put yellow on, because this is actually more opaque and will go on the surface much better. So I will go ahead and just paint up the parts. And I did switch my camera. My GoPro was not focusing on these guys very well. Here you don't have to, again, be very careful, because you're going to be painting over a lot of this other stuff later with a black. And so I put on yellow because my guys are, what are they called? Bad Moons? Part of the Bad Moon tribe, I think. So these guys are going to be a mix of black, yellow, and silver, brown, and you just pick sort of random parts that you want to be those colors. And it's a good mix because, you know, orcs aren't concerned about matching or having uniforms or anything like that. It's sort of a hodgepodge of things. So just paint it and color it the way that you want. Doesn't really matter. And you got to be careful here though not to get it on the skin as you're going around working on his jersey. And this is going to be washed later. But see, it pretty much looks like yellow, even though it's more opaque and sort of mustardy. It's not a true yellow. So it looks pretty good, I think. So I'll go ahead and do a couple of the orcs with this yellow, and we'll come back later. Alright, so as you can see here, I'll usually alternate either doing the top shirt yellow or the pants yellow. I usually don't do the whole thing yellow because then it looks like they're wearing jumpsuits, and I think that looks silly. So alternating between yellow, black, and brown, I'm going to go ahead and choose to do black next. And what I'll do is paint not only sort of the shirt and the clothes or the boots, but I will also paint anything that's going to be silver, black as well. Because I like black as an undercoating for any silver that I do. And the paint I use for all of my black and white is craft paint. Because I use so much of it, it isn't really worth using the more expensive miniature paint because I go through tons and tons of this color. And again, you know, doesn't really matter if you get it on things that aren't supposed to be black, as long as you're not going over the yellow or the green. You want to avoid hitting that at all. So being careful, you just cover anything that is supposed to be silver or black and just paint through that. You can just as well paint the gun parts silver, anything that's going to be metal silver, and then do a wash, a dark wash over it. So that's definitely an option, but you know, my preference has always been just to paint it black and then dry brush with silver. That always felt easier to me for some reason, but I've done it the other way before too. Just sort of depends on what you're thinking at the moment. And what I like to do is go back through the paint job with a smaller brush, because I'm there's some crevices that I can't get to. I risk smudging onto the skin. And so I need a smaller brush in order to go there. But with this guy, I'll do his shirt. And why do I pick the colors in the order that I do? And in essence, I like to color from the deepest part, what's going to be the lowest, to the highest. And so, because most of the strapping is going to be brown, and the strapping is sitting on top of the shirt, I prefer to color the shirt first because it's underneath it, and it's easier to paint whatever's raised last. And so that's how I pick the color pattern that I do. And it just makes it easy to paint because the straps, which will be brown, doesn't matter if I get black on it because that's the last color I'll paint. And so I can just paint right over the black. And I'll paint the boots as well. And the boots have little bits of metal on them. And that's okay to paint black because again, I will go over it with silver later. So I'll go ahead and finish up this batch of guys and then show you how to do the brown next. Alright, so my blacks are done, and the next color I'm going to use is brown, russet brown. I know you can't see because it's so faded, but this is russet brown from Reaper. And I grab my thin brush for this one, and I'm basically going to go through and do strapping and boots that I haven't painted black. And as you can see here, I did, on spots like this, I did paint the whole thing black so that I have a black undercoat for where the brown is going on top of. And that's just because of ease. Once again, like I said, I think it's easiest just to go from the bottom up in terms of layers so that you can do exactly that. Just paint everything black first and then go over it with the brown because the strap is on top of the black. And that just makes it easier to paint. I've always wanted to paint an orc squad, and so Kill Team really enables me to be able to paint all different kinds of models that I've always wanted to paint, but never wanted to build an entire army. And so this is a great game. I'm also painting anything that's going to be the copper color brown as well, in the same way that the black is the base for the silver. Brown is going to be my base for anything that is copper or gold. These guys don't really have gold on them. I'll be painting copper. And then also the horns, where it goes from dark to light, I always put the brown close to where the horns go into the helmet because I like it to fade out to white, and so it's best to put some brown right at the edges. About half of these guys I am going to paint their pants as well as shoes. So this guy, half of the guys have black shoes and the other half will be brown like this one. And so not too hard doing this. And you can use different browns if you want. You don't have to use the same brown for everyone. Yeah, so for the most part I base my skulls with brown. And then we'll later on, after the wash, put on more of a bone color. Alright, so I finished with all of the brown and the strapping. And just on this guy, I didn't want the backpack to be the same as all the strapping, so I put on orange-brown for the backpack. And now I'm going to go ahead and go back and put on some tanned leather to all of the bones. So this guy's skull, as well as any of the helmets that have horns. And this just creating it lighter. You're dry brushing it for the most part. We are going to put white on this later. This is just creating an intermediary color. You can do the teeth if you want, but I just go ahead and do that white later on. Here's a guy with horns. And so, like I said before, I do the darker brown closer to the edge. And now I'm going to go through with the golden yellow everywhere. Not all the spots that I painted previously, but in the major areas, I'll just touch up with this normal yellow, which makes it brighter. And the reason why I do this after I paint all the other colors, instead of doing it after the first layer of yellow, is because in case I mistakenly dab one of the other colors onto the yellow, and this is just a way that I'll be able to cover it up. So again, you don't have to do the whole area, but just touch up on spots that you think would be highlighted, because it does brighten it up. And honestly, I avoid brightening up areas that might be in shadow. But again, you don't have to do the whole thing. Just touch up and highlight areas where the light would fall on it most naturally. And you could do this after the wash, but I find that it will blend a lot more smoothly if you do it before the wash. Because the next step after this is washing the yellow parts with the sepia. A quick note about brushes. So as you can tell here, this brush is ready to be retired, because see those little pokies sticking out? They're sort of like toothbrushes, where over time the tips will fray and you'll lose your edge. And this is ready to be retired, because when those little bristles start poking out like that, you lose control of where the paint goes. And so, for example, you can see here as I was putting this yellow on, one of those side bristles put yellow into the crevice there where I didn't want it to go. So that's how you know. And you never throw away brushes, because you can use these for flocking or basing or gluing or other things like that. But at this point, this is ready to go. This is why I never buy expensive brushes, because I find no matter whether or not they're the really cheap brushes that I get in a pack at Walmart, like 5 of them come in a pack for a couple of dollars, versus the more expensive ones, is all of them fray. I find all of them fray and have only a lifespan of maybe painting 100 miniatures or so. And so I go through brushes pretty quickly, because the tip usually doesn't last very long. So now we're going to go ahead and shade with Seraphim Sepia. I find that this shade actually works best for yellows and light browns and beiges, and so this is a really good wash. If you have the Army War paints, you can experiment with the soft tone or strong tone. Definitely not the dark tone. Dark tone is almost black, but you can experiment and see which one you like. But I like this one because it does have sort of that brownish tint to it, which makes it ideal for yellows. I tend not to buy Army or GW paints because they are more expensive, but I do have some of them, and this wash is one of them. I think I paid $7 for it, so they're not cheap at all. But I go ahead and just grab a bigger brush like this one and go to town wherever there is yellow. Wherever there's yellow on the model, and this does exactly the same thing as the green did for the skin, the orc skin, and provides shading. So again, be pretty liberal with it. And it doesn't matter if you get it on to the green, just avoid pulling a lot of it on there. And I can put it on the horns too, wherever there's white. So this just creates shading for all of the yellow parts. Alright, so I'll do the rest. Alright, so at this phase I actually will dull coat my miniatures, and I use Tester's dull coat. This is really the only reliable matte spray that I found that doesn't cloud up your miniatures based on humidity or stuff like that. So really this is the only one that I ever use. And I've already sprayed them, and the next phase is to put the silver on. And this is why I actually put my protective coat now, because if I put the silver and the copper paint on and then spray dull coat, it basically makes everything the silver non-shiny, and I don't want to do that. So basically what I want to do is just color, dry brush the guns and anything else that I want silver. This actually isn't that dry, it's a little too wet. And the silver I use is shadowed steel. This is a little bit darker, and then after that dries I will follow up with plate mail metal, and this is Army Painter brand. So you use whatever brand you have and make all your guns and whatnot that you want silver. And you can leave, because you're dry brushing, you can leave the edges black, some of the recessed areas black, and you can color that piece of metal there. And then I'll go through with my smaller brush and paint these parts silver as well. Yeah, go ahead and do that, and then do the lighter silver after that's dry. Let me take this opportunity to introduce you to my paint shaker. This is a Sawzall from Harbor Freight, really cheap, and I attached this clamp up the top. I know that I saw, got this idea on YouTube. People normally just use, what are they called, jigsaws in order to do this. But my jigsaw actually can't fit this clamp. And I actually went to Harbor Freight to look it up, and the current Sawzalls that they have also don't fit this thick of a clamp. So I'm not sure what to tell you if you can get an older version of a jigsaw, but this is my solution. Works super well. So in the same way that we did all of the silver, I'm now going to use copper. This is hash nut copper from Citadel. So these are going to be all of the brown that I painted before on the guns. And again, I'm dry brushing the brown parts, trying not to get it in all of the cracks. Alright, so I got the copper on there, and now I'm going to take gray, which is stone gray here, and highlight the black. And I don't do all of it, just the hair, like this guy's hair, and some of the edges on the clothing. So dry brush, like that. Bring out the highlights a little bit. And this is more edging, lifting up the edges. Alright, now we're going to go into the details, and first thing I'm going to do is red. The tongue, oops, see, I do the tongue first because I think this brush is too big, but I'll be able to go over in white with that. And if I can, I'll dot the eyes. Very small, right? Now let me switch brushes, but that is pretty much all the red. Oh, I'll do the one of these in red as well. Alright, so now I got all of the painting done pretty much, and I did notice that the boy set did come with these transfers, and I've decided not to do the transfers. The places that you could put these on if you wanted to is like the shoulder pads, this back circle. You can put, you know, any of these symbols on there pretty easily, or, you know, across the shoulder pad, one of these. But again, the whole point of this is to get these on the tabletop as fast as possible, and so I'm not going to be using this transfer sheet and going to be pretty much keeping these as is. Right now I'll show you how to go ahead and base, and the material that I use is this ballast that I got from a hobby store at Hobby Lobby. It's called medium brown and pretty much looks like this. And I hate painting bases after gluing down sand on here and then needing to base it and paint over it or anything like that. So I found this system as a way of not needing to paint. As well, I have some flock that I'll be putting on too. I don't remember exactly which one of the flocks this is from, but it's from Gale Force 9, and it's pretty much sort of the generic grasslands flock, I think. And so this is how I do it. I go ahead and grab my piece, and I grab my super glue, and I pretty much just create a random pattern on here of super glue, and sort of spread around like this. And then I'll take a toothpick and spread it around a little bit, like so. And I don't go all the way to the edge. Try not to, at least. And then once I'm done, I go ahead and grab my sand and just dip the thing in here like this. And tap it, and pretty much have to wipe the sides down. I usually take a brush with water once this is all dry and wipe it down to get all the flakes off. And so by using the super glue, this will dry within a minute or two, which is what I need. And I actually use Elmer's glue for the flocking, and so I'll show you in a little bit after this dries. Completely dry with the super glue and gravel, and now I am just applying the Elmer's glue. And again, just use a toothpick to move it around. And the reason why I use Elmer's glue for the flocking is because the super glue, when it dries shiny, and I think it makes the static grass sort of lay down, whereas I think Elmer's glue actually has it stand up a little bit more. So I go ahead and apply and tap it off, and then see how it's sort of messy on the edges. I sort of like to push it up with my thumb so it's not quite as sort of flying all over the place. I do want to show you how to put on a tuft of grass, and so I have this Army Painter Battlefields. This is Swamp Tuft, and so after all the flock is dry, what I do is I grab super glue, and I left the spot open right here, and I'll go ahead and put a drop of super glue there, and then stick it right on there. Like that. You see? It's as simple as that.